In this video, we will be resuming our Versus series, comparing Austin with another city within this great state of Texas. And in this video, we will be revisiting the subject of Austin versus Dallas, this time comparing the certain pros and cons that Austin and Dallas have in common with each other, as well as the differing pros and cons against each other. The purpose of this video is to entertain and educate so that hopefully by the end you can arrive at your own conclusion and figure out which one is right for you. And we're getting after it right now. Hello again, everybody. If this is your first time of the channel, my name is Frank, and I'm part of a team at the award-winning J.B. Goodwin Brokerage right here in the vibrant Austin, Texas. Each and every week, we put out tons of new content all in regards to living in Austin, Texas, whether it be the pros and cons, the cost of living, vlog tours of certain areas and suburbs, comparisons of certain cities and states like this one, and so much more. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel and ringing the little bell so that you're notified each and every time we put out a new video. In addition, we get reach outs all the time from people just like you who are in need of our help when relocating to this great city of Austin, Texas. We love finding the right place that fits your lifestyle and making that move as smooth as possible. But the only way we can do that is by you reaching out to us. So don't be shy, whether you're 9 days away or 90 days away, go ahead and shoot us a text, send us an email, give us a call, any day of the week, any time of day. It's what we love to do. Now, moving right along, let's talk about how Austin compares to Dallas, Texas. And I will toss out a little bit of a disclaimer. I am local to Austin. Austin is where I am from. And though I've been to Dallas many times, I do not claim to be as much of an expert on Dallas as I am with Austin. The goal of this video is to help and to do our best when comparing the two. So if there are any local people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area watching this video, please feel free to correct me in the comments, but know that I am doing my best. So for starters, let us begin with the pros that the two have in common. Not to worry, I will be getting to an abundance of cons later in this video, but I figure why begin by bumming you out? So let's start with some positivity. The first pro that these two great cities have in common is something I've heard a lot in the comments, something I've experienced in my own life, and something I've heard from the past clients we've helped relocate to Austin and this great city of Texas, and that's going to be the Southern culture. If you've ever heard of that stereotype, let me tell you, it is very true. It is a breath of fresh air for many people, but it can also be very off-putting, and here's why. We have engaged with clients who have come from the Northeast, who've come from California. A lot of the coasts is where a lot of people are relocating from because of the prices and whatnot. And when they get to Texas, not just Austin, which is why I'm including Dallas on this, and possibly even more so in Dallas than Austin, because Austin's more of a melting pot of people relocating than Dallas is. Dallas will have more genuine, authentic Texans, in my subjective opinion. And so a lot of the people who come here, they might be used to living a certain way. It doesn't mean they're mean. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It simply means that where they come from, the norm is to be more standoffish. It's to be more enclosed, less friendly, maybe more me, myself, and I, maybe more driven, whatever the adjective may be. And here it's perfectly normal to be stopped by a stranger on the street. And if you're from New York, for example, you might think, oh my God, my life's in danger. But no, here it's oftentimes just to say hello, to compliment your dog, to invite you to their garage party, to their barbecue cookout. That is very common here, and it throws a lot of people. And as I said, for many, it might be that breath of fresh air you're looking for, because where a lot of people are coming from, they might get bummed out by the culture. So here it's like, oh, finally, this is what we've been looking for. But I've also heard the opposite. It makes some people very uncomfortable. Not that they think badly towards the people who are friendly, the Southern manners and what have you, but it's like a culture shock to some extent. I don't mean to be too dramatic with it, but it really is a very real thing here that you can only I can only describe it so much with my words. It is something you have to experience. I remember for a short period in my life, I lived in the Los Angeles area, specifically Pasadena. And at the time, several years ago, I was working in the service industry. You know, you got to work 2 jobs in that city if you're new to it, you know, you're younger. So one of those jobs was the service industry. And I recall, you know, I took my Southern manners with me, so I was often saying, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, my pleasure, have a great day. Things that are normal, right? Like, I mean, most people wherever you're watching this understand that's normal, but I mean, I would get funny looks sometimes, or even my management would pull me aside and say, you know, we're not requiring you to say these things. It's great that you're being polite, but don't feel like you're being forced to do that. And you know, I had to remind them that I'm from Texas, and then there's kind of this moment of, oh, it's a Texas thing, you guys. You know, like other people were talking about it, and some people thought that my other job was Chick-fil-A because apparently they always like to say my pleasure when you say thank you. So that really was the first time I realized that I was standing out, that I was different, when really I was just acting as normal as I always have been in Texas, right? So that's really just a little example to give you an idea of how it might just be jarring. Another good thing about the Southern culture is you'll see it when you're driving. Now, disclaimer, obviously, you have your jerks everywhere you live. Texas is no different. If anything, they're gonna be more intense jerks because they'll have a gigantic truck and they'll run you off the road. And so you have those. I'm not saying you don't. But the Southern culture otherwise trickles into the little things like driving, where someone will stop to let you in, and then when you go, they'll give you a little nod or wave or something. Maybe if they have a hat, they'll tip it, that kind of thing. And just little things like that. I mean, I've oftentimes given waves through like the rear view window type of thing, and then I see them in my rear view kind of waving back. It's just nice. It's something that I did not experience very much in Los Angeles at all. So before I ramble any further, that's just my main point. You know, be prepared to make friends if you're coming here and you're newly married, or you're missing your circle wherever you're coming from. It's just going to be very easy to make friends, especially if you're living in the suburban areas of either Dallas or Austin. Another pro these 2 great cities have in common with each other is going to be the bang for your buck affordability. Now, this is something I'll get into a little bit later in the video when comparing how expensive Austin is in comparison to Dallas, but overall, just by being in Texas by default, even still, they are both going to be the better bang for your buck options, at least as opposed to the coasts. Now, if you're moving from the Midwest or one of these places that is already affordable, you might find it even more expensive when you get to Texas, but most of the time, at least from a majority of the clients we help who are relocating solely because it's getting so outrageously expensive wherever they live, the affordability is a big deal here. And so whether it is Dallas or whether it is Austin, if you are selling your tiny place in Portland, Oregon for $400,000, $500,000, or mind you, your tinier place in the Bay Area of California for under $1 million, and you take that here, your options are going to open up tremendously. I mean, $500,000 either in Austin or in Dallas can buy you a home near a golf course with a theater room, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet. I mean, a pool. It really is a different world here. And yes, in my opinion, I will elaborate further, it is even more so possible in Dallas because Austin is more expensive. But people still come to Austin all the time with these budgets they take from these more expensive states and just upgrade, you know, especially if they're moving to these suburban areas where there are a lot of new builds that oftentimes go even cheaper brand new than a lot of the pre-owned homes already on the market. I mean, it really is, we're seeing the growth of both of these cities just blow up. I mean, Dallas has always been a metropolis, so by default it is much larger than Austin. So Austin's growth is going to look much more dramatic because it is smaller. So yes, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the pro that both of those have in common, being that affordability and bang for your buck relative to the coasts at least. Otherwise, it is the #1 reason that brings people here, at least in my experience doing real estate. The next pro that Austin will have in common with Dallas is going to be the overall size. Now, I can already hear it in the comments. You're thinking, Dallas is just remarkably larger than Austin, Texas, and yes, that is true. However, I'm not speaking specifically to the size of the city. I am talking about the greater Dallas area and the greater Austin area. So yes, even though Dallas is going to have the larger overall area, Austin is still much larger, deceivingly so, than people expect it to be when they're looking at the overall suburbs it has to offer. By a default of living in a state as humongous as Texas, a state that can cover much of the Northeast, much of Europe, I mean, it's just that big. By default, your greater surrounding areas outside of the city are going to be so much drastically larger than whatever you're probably used to wherever you're coming from. And so in a lot of ways that actually can be a con, which I will address a little bit later when we're going over the cons. But the reason I'm mentioning that as a pro is because your options really open up when you have too many suburbs to even remember off of the top of your head. And the more suburbs, the more options, the more variety of types of homes, the more variety of ranges of price, the more variety of things to do, and the more opportunities for you to come to this great state of Texas. The next pro that these two great cities of Austin and Dallas are going to have in common with each other is that of the schools. Yes, it is true, a huge reason people come here is because they're being relocated for work. Yes, it is true, a big reason why people come here is because of the affordability I've discussed. However, another reason, a humongous reason that people, at least in our experience with the clients we've helped, are coming to Texas is for the school districts. They are the cream of the crop. And, you know, when you're younger, because I went to school here once upon a time, you don't know what you don't know. So you think naturally your experience is everyone's experience until you grow up, you travel, you meet people, your perspectives grow, you broaden your horizons, and you really open your eyes to what else is out there. So I have met a lot of people who went to public schools that the AC wasn't working for weeks at a time, or they still had chalkboards, or they didn't have computers for the kids, or they would find homeless people sleeping in the stairways, or whatever the case may be. And it startled me because here in Texas, public schools, mind you, I'm not even talking about private schools, public school districts here are basically private schools, just without the uniforms. Whether you are in Dallas or whether you are in Austin, you are going to have an abundance of very respectable districts, large in size because of the size of Texas, that have maybe 30,000, 40,000 students, while simultaneously maintaining tremendous graduation rates, tremendous ACT test scores, SAT test scores, and so on. And in addition to a majority of these schools being built in the last 1, 5, 7, 10, 15 years, relatively new compared to a lot of perhaps other inner city schools, you're also going to have tremendous football stadiums. You're going to have numerous buildings. I mean, the high school I went to had 4 or 5 buildings, and that 5th building was built years later just for what felt like the hell of it as an auditorium, and it was used for band shows, for choir shows, for talent shows, for tech theater, for assembly, and so on. And then right across the street, as I mentioned, they built a brand new football stadium, also for the hell of it, that rivals some college stadiums in size and quality. So my point is, here in Texas, not just Austin, not just Dallas, but as a whole, Texas really hangs its hat on these cream of the crop public school districts. And most of the clients we've helped who've had families coming to Austin, and I'm sure the same goes for Dallas, at the top of their priority list are X, Y, and Z school districts and what neighborhoods are surrounding those districts, because they hear, even from wherever they're coming from, that the schools are just amazing here. And trust me, I'm not trying to sugarcoat everything. I'm not trying to say it's amazing and perfect, because those types of real estate agents gross me out, and I'm sure they gross you out too. But when it comes to the subject of schools, there just aren't so many bad things you can say. I mean, they often get high praise. This is why they get all these boosters, which are basically parents who give money to them. They have a lot of support from the local councils and governments. So it's just the gift that keeps on giving. And on a personal note, I am someone who did not grow up with much money, and going to public schools in the state of Texas made me feel like I did. Now, real quickly, before moving on to the rest of this video, go ahead and comment down below with any agreements you might have, corrections, disagreements, questions for us, or ideas for future videos. We would love to get involved with you guys. In addition, consider liking this video as well, as it really helps our channel grow and tells us that you think we're doing a good enough job providing some value for you. And lastly, if you've got a parent, if you've got a friend, if you've got a spouse, if you've got a child, whatever the case may be, someone in your life who you know is relocating to the great city of Austin, Texas, go ahead and share our content with them and spread the good word. The next pro that Austin has in common with Dallas, and that is also bringing a good amount of people here, is the lack of harsh winters. Yes, it is true, in 2021 we had the worst winter that I think Texas has seen in about 60 years. But that goes to tell you that we probably won't see another one like that for another 60 years. Our winters here usually, it'll snow maybe once every 7 years. The closest thing we get to snow on a normal basis is going to be sleet or black ice, the types of things that make the driving hazardous, but it's not really snow, if you know what I mean. But even still, because we're the South, they will shut down school, they will shut down work, we'll act like we just got hit with a blizzard. But having said that, most of our winters get as cold as the 30s, sometimes you'll see mid to upper 20s, but usually the coldest it gets is the 30s, and then your highs during the day are going to be 40s, maybe 50s on a warmer day. And for us, that's normal because, you know, we get used to the heat here, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So for us, that's freezing, right? But the thing is, I cannot tell you how many phone calls, texts, and emails I have gotten from people who say, Frank, we just can't take it anymore. I'm coming from New York, I'm coming from Montana, wherever the place it may be, and they are sick of these winters that seem to last 6 months of just snow, shoveling, all this crap they have to deal with that is just such a different, drastic lifestyle. And so I warn them about the heat that I'm going to elaborate on further later in this video, but they'll hear none of it. They are ready for it, or so they think, but what they're more ready for are the several months of the year that are nice. I mean, if you survive the brutal summers, you're going to experience better temperatures, more tolerable temperatures, and of course, most importantly, you are not going to suffer such harsh winters. 6 months of snow versus snow every 7 years. If you're sick of snow, that sounds pretty good, so I don't blame them. It is something that brings people here. And then in the summer, they like to travel back to where they came from to escape the heat. But I don't know, take the good with the bad. Another little pro, but still worth mentioning, that Austin and Dallas have in common with each other is going to be the umbrella of things that are unique and local to being a Texan. I'm talking about Whataburger, which is our esteemed fast food burger joint. I'm talking about H-E-B, which you will find more in other cities in Texas than in Dallas, so I guess that speaks more to Austin, but you might find some outside of the Dallas area. And for anyone currently living in Dallas, you know, if you've recently got one built there, oh my God, please tell people in the comments so that they can understand what they have to look forward to with H-E-B. The best grocery store shopping experience, in my opinion. I've heard different opinions of people from people who they prefer Trader Joe's, and I've been to Trader Joe's. I have respect and appreciation for Trader Joe's, but in my opinion, it's just apples to oranges. So yes, we have local things like H-E-B, and no, I'm not being paid to praise them. However, H-E-B, if you're watching this, give me a call because I would love to talk. We've also got the best barbecue you can find because this is Texas after all. So you're going to find, yes, your big chains of barbecue, but you're also going to find those mom and pop, hole in the wall, hidden places that only locals know types of barbecue. You'll also have Specs, which is a liquor store that is family owned. Expanded, of course, now in Texas, you'll find them throughout, but that is something that a lot of Texans like. My brother has an account with Specs just to get deals and things of that nature. And so yeah, those are just a few examples off the top of my head, but in the state of Texas, you have so many things that are just a byproduct of living in Texas, that are unique to living in Texas, that you'll find in abundance whenever you move here. In addition to that, the final pro, I'll call it a bonus pro because I won't get too much into it, that Austin and Dallas or any place in Texas will have in common with each other that I absolutely love, and you might not think anything of it, is the parking. Now, this is something I experienced firsthand when I lived in California, and I know Los Angeles should not be compared to anywhere else in the country, really, aside from maybe Manhattan in terms of the parking situations. But I have then later heard from clients coming from the coast primarily that they experience it too in other cities and states that I didn't even think would have the same problem. And here in Texas, because it's so big and spread out and everything is built like this, not like that, right? The parking follows suit. So if you are living in a state where anywhere you go, whether you're going to Walgreens, whether you're going to the bank, whether you're grabbing a bite to eat, anywhere you go, you have to worry on some level about parking, street parking, having to parallel, having to go into a lot and wait for a car to leave, or ending up finding a garage or something of that nature. Those days are long gone. Barring if you're going to some big event, maybe downtown, where parking is going to be more of a hassle. Of course, you'll have that anywhere you go. But otherwise, I grew up here, so I was used to just not worrying about parking. And what a culture shock that was for me. Someone who sucks at parallel parking, by the way, to get used to. I mean, I'm talking any place. Even if I'm going to Taco Bell at 1 in the morning, the parking lot was just jammed. The street was jammed. It's so densely populated, you know? So here, and smushed together for that matter, I forgot to mention, everything there is just smushed together. So here, with everything being spread out, it is just a breath of fresh air to go wherever you want to go. 99 out of 100 times you will find parking, and if not that, you'll find a great parking spot. Not super serious, it's not like a humongous thing that that brings people here, right? But it is a bonus that I've heard from a lot of people we've helped, that I've experienced firsthand, and that I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this can understand and relate to on some level. So, worth mentioning, you know, parking for me is, I never thought it mattered until it did, so I'm happy to be back. Now let's move on from all the positivity. I think we've covered enough ground with the pros that Austin and Dallas have in common with each other, and now let's get to the negative, the juicy stuff. I am told that negative news sells, which obviously is why the media is a thing. For starters, let us begin with a subject that might be a little more fun, and to quote Stephen A. Smith, an ESPN personality, stay off the weed. It is true, here in the state of Texas, that marijuana is still illegal. And why is this a con? Unfortunately, no, it's not for the people who like to get high who are watching this video. What? This is more so for the people who use cannabis to aid their anxiety, to aid their depression, or in my older brother's case, who is autistic and epileptic, who could greatly benefit from it in terms of his seizures. Any kind of supplemental use of cannabis that is enhancing your own well-being in your day-to-day life. If you are someone who depends on it, it is not going to be as easy to come by here in the state of Texas. Thankfully, in my own personal life, my family has managed to get a hold of these THC cannabis drops that go under the tongue for the use of minimizing seizures. And let me tell you, it is neither cheap nor easy to make that kind of thing happen. You really have to go through hurdles and do things the right way, you know what I mean? So if you are used to just after work going to your local dispensary 2 blocks from where you live and grabbing a bunch of weed or grabbing gummies or whatever your flavor of it is, those days are long gone. And with Texas being more of a overall conservative state, it is most likely going to be one of the last states to legalize it. So yes, to the stoners out there, I do apologize. I don't mean to just brush you off, but on a more serious note, I am talking to those who do depend on it. That is why it is a con. Whether you're in Dallas, whether you're in Austin, you're out of luck. The next con these two great cities are going to have in common with each other, unfortunately, is going to be those high property taxes. So let's rewind for a bit. It is very well known that Texas has no state income tax. That is why so many people are flocking here. That is why so many companies especially are flocking here. And it is true, that is something that is a great perk of living here. And of course, as I mentioned, in addition to that, the affordability, the bang for your buck that you get here in Texas versus a lot of those cities on the coast. But the fine print, the other side of the coin, the terms and conditions that you don't read but click accept to, is going to be those property taxes. And I mentioned them. If you've been a subscriber, you know I always will mention the property taxes so that people just aren't blindsided. So many people that we've helped come here are used to spending 1% or maybe 1.5% on their property taxes per year. But here in Texas, that is not going to be the case. It is true, Austin will have on average higher property tax rates than Dallas, but ultimately they are comparable. It is not super duper lopsided in that regard. So here in either city, you are going to encounter property taxes that are at least 2.2, 2.3%, easily 2.5%, more commonly 2.6, 2.7%. And if you're going for some brand new community, some new build, something of the nature where everything's booming, you can actually expect to find some that are 3% or higher. And a little math example that I always use in my videos that I will use once again is, let's say you find a house that is $350,000 between Dallas and Austin. That is a relatively cheap or median type of house price. So let's say you get it for $350,000, and let's say you lock it in at a very fair 2.5%. You are going to be paying on average per year just under $9,000. And yes, in the state of Texas, you can protest those once a year because they appraise the land around your houses. So even if your house is smaller than all the rest on the street, they will appraise your house accordingly, and you have to go and protest that. So that's a good thing, I guess, but you shouldn't have to do that in the first place. And so, yeah, just under $9,000 at 2.5 or 350. Imagine if you get a house that is 750 for 2.85%. First of all, that's quick math. Second of all, I don't even want to do it because that is going to be such a hideous number that a lot of people are just thrown by. We've talked to people who have their finances in order. They know what they've been pre-approved for. They're working with their lender. They have all their ducks in a row, but what they're not accounting for or taking into account are those property taxes. It can easily screw things up. You have to readjust what your max is, redo the numbers, and it's a headache and it can be very disheartening. So I like to make it a point to mention it first and foremost in our videos when people are still in the phase of looking, so that they take it into account and that they're just not blindsided by it. Yes, the bang for your buck is good. Yes, the no state income tax is great, but just beware. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to deter or dissuade, but be aware. The more you know. The next con I'll mention that Austin and Dallas, Texas have in common with each other is inevitable. If you are psychic, you saw this coming, it is going to be the heat. If you're wanting a more in-depth video talking about the heat, what to expect with the heat, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, everything you have to know, we did make a video on the summers here in Austin, of course, by default here in Texas. So for now, I'm just going to be a little bit more vague, a little bit more general, and give you a condensed overview. So, end of May, early September, that is your gap. You can easily expect in May and June, 90s, and then when you get to July and August, triple digits. And to give you an idea, 90s here are not 90s wherever you're coming from, right? So on a 93 degree here in the month of June, in your app, the weather app, you can see feels like 106, 108 degrees. That is because here in Texas, granted it's not Houston humidity, but between Austin and Dallas, you are certainly going to have those intense muggy days, probably a little bit more so in Austin because it is south of Dallas, right? But even still, you will have those days where you go outside and it feels like you are opening the oven and the heat just slaps you. In my personal opinion, I would rather have a 100 degree day in Pasadena, California than a 90 degree day here in Texas. It can be that bad. So naturally, when you get to July and August and it is no longer 93, but it is 103, that feels like is going to be well over 110 degrees. And it is brutal. You won't feel like going to the pool. You won't feel like going on hikes. You won't feel like enjoying the outdoors that Dallas or Austin have to offer. You are going to want, I guess I'm speaking for myself, you are going to want to lock yourselves inside and crank your AC. And that's another thing I'll add, you guys, those monthly bills, expect your AC to be astronomically expensive and expect your water to be even more expensive because you are not going to want to let that grass die because the dirt underneath the grass is going to harden like rock, so nothing is going to grow from it. If you have a vegetable garden, a fruit garden, flower garden, or you just want to, have a nice landscape and compete keeping up with the Joneses with your neighbors, you are going to be watering your lawn in those brutal summer months like you never have before, and you are going to really really feed your monthly bills. That is just a little heads up I will give you. The good news, however, as I mentioned, is that it really is end of May through early September. The rest of the year, October through probably April, are going to be great months. It is going to be 80s, 70s, 60s. It's going to be much more tolerable, and that is why so many people come here, because if they think to themselves, if I can just withstand those 3 months in the summer, I'll be good the rest of the year. And that's very true. But it is a con worth mentioning, because you might think in your head, yeah, I'm ready for that heat. Really? Come and do it for 3 freaking months and see how much you like it, how ready you thought you were by the end of it. It's not pretty, so there you go. The next con that Dallas, Texas and Austin, Texas have in common with each other is something I briefly touched on earlier in this video as a pro, which I now will elaborate further on as a con, because it is kind of a double-sided coin, and that would be the size of Texas. Yes, it is great because you have an abundance of price options, styles of homes, things that fit your lifestyle, what you want to be close to, so on and so forth. But if you're used to walkability, or if you're used to not even owning a car, those days will be long gone when you come to Texas. Because everything is like this and spread out and nice, thankfully it's not staticky or intense or so densely populated, all good things. As a byproduct, it takes you longer to get from point A to point B. Your usual take a stroll out of your apartment or house, wherever you're living right now, and run a few errands and come back. That's not the case unless you live, say, in the heart of Dallas or in the heart of Austin, those downtown metro areas. So your trip to your local grocery store could be 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then you want to go to get some shopping done at a local shopping center. That can be another 10, 15, 20 minutes. That is a downside, right? Especially if you don't have a car. If you look at the cost of living between Texas and a bunch of other states in the country, of course you will see that we might be cheaper with utilities, or we might be cheaper with overall housing and things of that nature, food and groceries, but you'll always find that the transportation category is above the national average, and that is because of all the driving we do. And because of all the driving we do, we have toll roads here, and yes, I know toll roads are not exclusive to Texas, but being Texas, we have our own unique toll road system, which in my opinion is a blessing, but you pay to use it. And so that's another additional cost. Not significant, but just another way you spend your money living in Texas is you want to avoid the gunk, the highways, so you take the easier option that you pay for rather than, the main artery that's bound to get clogged whatever time of day you go. On that note of transportation, I'll naturally segue to something I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, is I'm now speaking to those who are coming from the Manhattans of the world, the San Franciscos of the world. Yes, Dallas is comparable in size. I believe it is the 4th largest metro area in the entire country. So, sorry, Austin, you are a little cockroach compared to these guys. But having said that, something that Texas lacks, in my opinion, feel free to tell me if you feel differently, is that our public transportation is pretty lackluster. I have had the fortune of traveling to some of the states in the country and really utilizing and taking advantage of their public transportation systems to get from point A to point B, run the errands of my day, what have you. But here in Texas, and especially here in Austin, it is going to be just a little bit disappointing. I'm not saying there are no options. I'm not saying that you're just out of luck if you're someone who likes to rely on public transportation, but it's just, you're just not gonna get what you already have if you're coming from one of these major locations on the coast, or even a little bit inland like the Chicagos of the world. Another con I'll mention, a smaller one mind you, but I still feel is worth mentioning, is that in our winters here, of course, they're not going to be as horrific as some of these other states, Idaho, Montana, whatever, the states that have 6 months of snow. But the thing is, because we are a state that is designed to withstand heat, all the homes here have AC units, right? It's not like optional, like in other places I've visited and was shocked to find. The thing is, when the winters come, and if it is anything like what we had this year in 2021, that unprecedented temperature and blankets of snow, we are not going to be able to handle it or cope. I mean, I'm not just talking about the people, and yes, we were made fun of, but try our summers and then we'll try your winters, right? But I'm talking about the power grid. I'm talking about the state. As soon as we had temperatures that were below the 20s, and we had a lot of snow. I mean, we lost power, we lost water. I remember I had to melt ice and then boil the water and then use the water from a pitcher and bathe myself over the sink. If I needed to charge my phone, I would have to go out to my car and break off the ice and then get in the car, and if it would start, then I would plug in my phone and charge it there. And of course, when the power goes out and you need to keep warm, you also go to your car and crank the heat, things like that. I mean, it was insane. And school was absolutely shut down. No one was going to work. It was eerie because you would adventure out without snow boots and explore because no one's driving, right? And it just looked desolate, like a ghost town. It was really weird. So that is a con. You know, it doesn't happen all the time, which is why it's a smaller con. But if it does ever happen again, maybe not to that extreme, but something of the sort, Texas just can't freaking handle it. And consider that your warning. Now, the last con I'll mention that Dallas and Austin both have in common, before going into the other things that Austin might have that Dallas doesn't, that Dallas has that Austin doesn't, and directly comparing the two, the last con that they have in common, unfortunately, is going to be the scenery or lack thereof. I hate to be Captain Obvious, but in case you missed the memo, first and foremost, Texas has always been a place of farm and ranch land. Yes, we have our nature spots. Yes, we have our lakes. Yes, we have our cool little tucked away paradises that look very pretty. But barring those, and overall on a much more general note, being originally farm and ranch land, you're just not going to be blown away when you move to Texas, especially if you're coming from a place like Lake Tahoe or Northern California or even Southern California or even Arizona or Oregon or Washington or Montana. One of these places that has breathtaking nature where the city skyline is surrounded by mountains. And so if that is what you're used to, if you're used to having the beach very close by, if you're used to palm trees, if you're used to Great Plains and mountains and bodies of water and all of that good stuff, you will be so disappointed when you come to Texas. I'm not saying it's hideous, and it can be very green, and I'm probably speaking to at least a small number of people who might favor the farm and ranch flavor of nature, right? That might be your preference, but most people, at least in my experience, are just a little deflated and disappointed. I guess they knew it, but it just confirmed it when they got here, that it is just absolutely flat. And you know, Austin, because I am a local Austinite, I'll speak for Austin, we have our hills, but they're not mountains, they're hills, you know? And I'm sure Dallas is similar in terms of what it really has to offer in terms of nature and scenery and genuine wallpaper-worthy beauty. So I'm not saying we don't have an abundance of outdoorsy activities, especially Austin, which hangs its hat on being that adventurous, active, healthy type of city, right? But it's just not going to take your breath away, and I want to run that by you. So we do have much to offer for you to do outdoors. It's just not going to wow you while you're doing it. So if you've made it this far in the video, congratulations, and we thank you for hanging in there. Now it is time to talk about the differing pros and cons, seeing how Austin and Dallas directly compare, bringing up different points of emphasis that we think you might want to know, and doing so in a sort of rapid fire way. For starters, a pro for Dallas and a con for Austin is going to be that Dallas is more affordable than Austin. As I mentioned, they are both great bang for your buck locations, especially if you're coming from the coasts. However, in the month of June of 2021, I don't know when you're watching this, but the most recent month we have of data is June. And in that month of June, the median home price for Dallas, Texas, the greater Dallas area, is going to be right around $410,000. Now, that same month of June, the median home price in Austin, Texas, the greater Austin area, is going to be right under $600,000. Now, granted, those are smaller sample sizes. It is just the most recent single month of inventory that we're basing that off of. So your actual, past 12-month averages are going to be lower than that, but even still, Austin is the more expensive option to live in than Dallas. And not just Dallas. Austin is going to be more expensive than Houston. Austin is going to be more expensive than San Antonio. so on and so forth. So if you're keeping score, I'm not. Point goes to Dallas, 1 zip. Next up, let's talk about the things to do. And I will preface this by saying, yes, we all know both of them have an abundance of things to do. They are both great cities to live in. I am not dissing one by praising the other, but in this case, I am going to talk about how Austin is the winner, and here's why. A lot of people might prefer to live in Dallas and visit Austin. That is because Austin is the California of Texas. Austin is the tourist destination of all of Texas. Austin is also the relocation hotspot, not just of Texas, but of the country. Austin is going to offer all of the different music festivals, all of the different music venues. It's going to have an abundance of hiking destinations, of paddleboarding destinations, various lakes to choose from, so on and so forth. And I'm not saying, again, Dallas doesn't have any of that, but Austin really is that tourist destination, which by default means it has just an abundance of different eclectic things to do for all different people from all walks of life. And so yeah, in some ways that is a compliment to Dallas, because people would rather visit Austin than live here. But by default, it is going to, in my opinion, have more to do, more fun things to do as a road trip, and of course as a place to live if this is where you choose. So keeping score, 1-1. Next, I'll mention traffic and construction. Even though Dallas is a metropolis compared to Austin, and your reasoning mind wants to tell you, well, if it's a bigger city, it's going to have worse traffic and worse construction. No. Austin started as a tiny, small college town once upon a time, and it grew in popularity and in population quicker than the city itself and its infrastructure could keep up with. So even though Austin pales in size compared to Dallas, Texas, we are constantly in this never-ending cycle of traffic and construction. And because it is more of a relocation hotspot than Dallas, you are going to have more people flocking here, further contributing to that problem that Austin has. The more people coming here, the more traffic. The more traffic, the more construction. The more construction, the more traffic, and the more people are still coming here. So it's just this weird mix that just results in this never-ending game of catch-up that will likely be the bane of your existence if you live in Austin. Thankfully, not so much the suburbs, and same can be said for Dallas. And no, I'm not saying that Dallas is devoid of its traffic or its construction or its rush hour, nothing like that. But it's more of a well-oiled machine than Austin is. It has had the time to grow with its popularity and its population accordingly, so that it's never in that never-ending game of catch-up. So yeah, I would choose Dallas. I would choose the systems it has in place, the freeways, and especially in my experience, I think they're a little bit wider in Dallas as well. Not that that ultimately matters that much, but splitting hairs here. So if you are going to be commuting, if you're not going to be working from home, of course, our goal is to find you that perfect place that is close enough to your work. But if you are going to be driving a good amount every single day, I would go with a city that just runs a little bit better than Austin. So I believe that's 2 points to Dallas and 1 point to Austin. I don't know why I'm keeping score. Next is going to be a little bit more of a gimme. It's going to be a free point for both of them. So instead of 2-1, it's going to be 3-2. And that would be the difference in the styles and flavors of jobs. Now, obviously, both places are going to have similar comparable jobs, but one is going to have more of this, one is going to have more of that. And depending on what your profession is, that can either be a pro or a con. And rather than get into the lists of the rankings of the jobs and all of that stuff, I'm just going to mention off the top of my head the biggest industries in both of the cities. So Dallas is going to be your hub of oil and gas and manufacturing. Austin is going to be your tech hub with Silicon Hills moving here from the Bay Area. And in addition to that, you're going to have jobs in healthcare and jobs in education. Those are the big ones for Austin. Those are the big ones for Dallas. 1 point to each. That just gives you an idea. So many of the people that do relocate to Austin, contributing to it being the biggest hotspot location in the country, are the people who relocate for those tech jobs. They are really blowing up here left and right. Tesla just came here, Facebook is here, Google is here, Apple is here, IBM is here, Dell is here, so on and so forth. And In my opinion, it is going to be a little bit younger of a demographic as well, not exclusively, but again, splitting hairs, comparing the two. Now, this is another gimme in the sense of making the score 4-3 instead of 3-2, because it depends subjectively on who you are. And this is going to be the quick little subject of politics, right? So, just looking at it in terms of a political map. Dallas is going to be more traditional. Dallas is going to be a little bit more old-fashioned. Dallas is going to be more conservative and right-wing. Not everyone, but just as a majority. Austin is the liberal hub of Texas. It is the blue dot in the sea of red, and so that's how the two compare. Now, I just want to add, when it comes to Austin, I'm talking about the city. As soon as you get to the surrounding areas, right, the suburbs of Austin, no, it doesn't immediately swing harshly, drastically to the right. You're actually going to see it more mixed and balanced. And I'm sure Dallas can say the same in a lot of different areas, where if you walk down a suburban street come election time, you'll see a blue sign, a red sign, a blue sign, a red sign. But again, at the end of the day, ultimately, Dallas is going to be overall the more conservative choice. Austin is going to be more the liberal choice. And again, it also has to do with the cultures, right? Because Austin was just a college town, and that is a stereotype. It is a cliche that college towns, college students, college teachers are going to typically be more liberal. And so that really founded, and it has been established as just part of the Austin culture, ingrained in the Austin culture, woven into the Austin culture. So yeah, if you're on either side, I'm not saying these are places of extremes. I'm just reminding you, if you are someone who does care about the politics wherever you're going to live, because some people don't, a lot of people do, there you have it. You know, Dallas is more conservative, Austin is going to be more liberal. Next up, I'm going to talk about the cool factor and give this point to Austin. So let me explain. It's not that serious, but Austin is known to be trendy. Austin is known to be cool. Austin is known to be weird. Austin is known to be hipster. Austin is known to be a little pretentious. Austin is known to be artistic, so on and so forth. And so if you want to live in a place that has that reputation, that has that feel, because you really do feel it when you're here, that culture, look no further than Austin. But I'm not necessarily saying that's better than Dallas, because it is subjective. Dallas is a place that is unapologetically authentic. Dallas is old-fashioned, relatively. Dallas is more conservative. Dallas is more traditional. Dallas doesn't have to try to be cool. Dallas is cool. You know, it's not really pretentious, barring its kind of foodie spots, right? Because that's a big thing over there. That might be a little pretentious. But my point is, Dallas doesn't have to be trendy to be cool. It doesn't have to be the California of Texas to be cool. Dallas is just always going to be unapologetically Dallas. And that's, in my opinion, a certain charm of it that I do like. And it is certainly going to feel more Texan, if that is your thing. I'm not saying Austin doesn't feel Texan, because in spite of its many eccentricities, it still maintains a Texan feel, which in my opinion is pretty cool. But if you want it authentic, if you want it pure, if you want it without having to try, you know, that is Dallas. It is the older sibling, it is the more mature sibling, you know what I mean? And Austin's the loud, rowdy, unpredictable, artsy, younger sibling. So it is, though, going to be cooler by default. It is the tourist destination, it is the relocation destination. So for that alone, subjectively speaking, I'll give Austin a point just for being cool and weird. Next, I'm going to talk about the suburbs. And as I mentioned, both Austin and Dallas have an abundance of their suburbs, but because Dallas is a metropolis when compared to Austin, Texas, naturally its surrounding greater areas are going to reflect that. So a lot of the people we've helped move here, a majority of them have come for the suburbs. Yes, a number of them like to be closer to the city, depends on the demographic, but a majority of people want to be close enough to the city but not stuck in it. And I'm sure the same can be said for Dallas. So in Dallas, you've got obviously Fort Worth, you've got Southlake, you've got Addison, you've got Prosper, you've got Arlington, you've got McKinney, you've got Grapevine, you've got Whitechapel, you've got Frisco, you've got Plano, so on and so forth. And Austin obviously is going to have many as well. You've got your Leanders, you've got your Liberty Hill, Cedar Park, Georgetown, Round Rock, Pflugerville, Hutto, Taylor, so on and so forth. But even still, as abundant as they are here in the greater Austin area, which is, again, deceivingly large, Dallas is just going to have more suburban options by default due to its size. So if that's what you're after, I'm going to give that to the Dallas-Fort Worth area and give them that point. Next, I'm going to talk about the professional sports teams that Dallas has to offer as opposed to Austin. Now, if you're someone who does not give a damn about sports, if this doesn't apply to you, please, I do apologize, disregard what I am saying. But if you are someone who likes to congregate with sports, if you are someone who likes the camaraderie of sports, the form of escapism that it serves in our society, if you grew up going with your parents to sports events and now you go with your kids or you go with your friends, whatever the case may be, if you're a season ticket holder, if it in some way, shape, or form is part of your life, look no further than Dallas, and Austin is going to disappoint you. And yes, Austin did get its very first pro sports team, which is part of the MLS. Matthew McConaughey is one of the owners, I believe. But I mean, Dallas has the Cowboys, it has the Rangers, it has the Mavericks, and Austin just has the University of Texas, you know, and a lot of people are into college sports, but I'm not, and a lot of people aren't. So if that is something you like to do, it's going to be tough if you live in Austin, because I myself, I am a die-hard NBA junkie. I am an NBA historian, love the game, grew up playing basketball. Just, you could hook me up to an IV that is connected to basketball. That is how into it I am. And I would have killed for the opportunity to just go downtown, pick up some tickets, and just watch a game on a Tuesday night. But because Dallas is 4 hours away, because Houston is 3 hours away, because San Antonio's at least an hour and a half away, if I want to catch an NBA game, Spurs, Rockets, Mavericks, I need to make a trip of it. It needs to be an event. It needs to be something that you plan so much ahead of time. And that is a luxury I was so rudely denied growing up, and even still. So maybe I'll try and get into soccer so I can go to the MLS games, but you know, basketball is my love. So I bring that up because if that is something that is woven into your life in some way, Dallas is certainly going to be the better option, so we'll give them another point. I don't even know what the score is anymore. Next, we're going to talk about the beaches here in Texas and how the two compete in terms of accessibility to them. And for starters, the beaches here in Texas are a bit disappointing, at least if you're used to the Miamis of the world or the Santa Monicas of the world, right? The coasts, nice water, right? Here in Texas, we do have respectable beaches, primarily South Padre Island or Corpus Christi. In my opinion, not to offend anyone living in Galveston, but our Galveston beach it's gotta be the worst. It is murky, there's tons of seaweed, it's just not, it's your last option if you're here in Texas. So anyways, Austin is more centrally located in Texas, this huge state of Texas, that it is going to be a shorter drive if you want to go to the beach, especially if you're coming from a place that has beaches and you're used to going to the beach for spring break, for Father's Day, for birthdays, what have you. Austin is going to make it more accessible in terms of driving distance. And so I'm giving Austin a point for that. Now with Dallas, in Dallas's defense, because it is further north, if you want to go out of state for travel, you are closer to Oklahoma, you are closer to New Mexico, you're closer to Louisiana. And so that's better because when you're going from Austin, it's just add probably 4 hours on top of whatever you're wanting to do in the first place to get out of Texas. It's not like the Northeast where you can drive an hour from Rhode Island and be in Boston. You know, it's completely different here. So I am going to give Austin that point, that nod, in terms of just being closer to other attractions within Texas, right? But if you're wanting to get out of Texas, look to Dallas. Lastly, when comparing the two, I'm going to talk about food. And I'm gonna give this one to Dallas. And that is because despite the pushback I might get from Austinites watching this, Dallas is actually more of a hub for that. Austin likes to praise its avocado toast, its sushi, its tacos, all which are very great things, but Dallas is going to have more to offer in terms of brunch, in terms of 5-star fancy restaurants, eateries, trendy places. You know, I don't claim to be a foodie, so I'm not gonna make a fool of myself, but I do know for a fact that Dallas is that foodie hub of Texas, more so than Austin, as trendy and hipster as Austin is. or wants to be. Now, obviously, Houston might beg to differ, San Antonio might beg to differ, but we're comparing Dallas and Austin in this video. And in my opinion, Dallas is absolutely your go-to hub for that. So if that is one of your hobbies, if it is one of your passions, or if it even is one of your career paths where you are in the culinary arts or whatever the case may be, Dallas is going to have you covered a little bit more than Austin likes to think it can. And I'm not trying to insult Austin. Obviously, I live here and I do think our food scene is great and it is to be respected and appreciated, but splitting the hairs, I'll give that point to Dallas. So if you like to bring the family on a Saturday or Sunday and go out to eat and enjoy something nice that you've never heard of, that you've never been to, you're gonna have that in abundance in Dallas, lesser so here in Austin, Texas. And so I think the score is 7-5. Not that it really matters, because ultimately this is all subjective and it's all about what is right for you. Which place ticks more of your boxes? Which place do you see yourself moving to or are already considering moving to? You know, hopefully in this video we've been able to educate you, to paint you a decent enough picture and let you know what you can expect from each respective city, what their strengths are, what they have in common, what they don't, so on and so forth. So whether it is in Austin where we are based or whether it's Dallas where we know other people doing this, other teams there that we could refer you to, regardless of your choice, what we love to do and what we pride ourselves in doing is finding that perfect spot that fits your lifestyle, that fits your needs, making your move as smooth as possible to where all you've got to do is pack up those boxes and we take care of the rest. Taking care of people just like you who are in need of our help when relocating. But the only way we can do that is by you reaching out to us. So whether you're 9 days away or 90 days away, do not hesitate. Go ahead and shoot us a text, give us a call, send us an email any day of the week, any time of day. In addition, we put out tons of new content each and every week, all in regards to living here in this great city of Austin. So if that does interest you, consider subscribing to our channel and ringing that little bell so that you're notified each and every time we put out a new video. Consider liking this video as well, as it really helps our channel grow and tells us that we're doing a good enough job providing some value for you guys. Share this with anyone you know in your life who is relocating to Austin, Texas. Spread the good word. Comment down below with any corrections, agreements, disagreements, questions, or video ideas. We'd love to get involved with you guys. And until the next one, my name is Frank. This is Living in Austin, Texas, and we will absolutely catch you later.